Howdy, you delicious people! I'm here today to review The Ambulance from 1990. So, my real intrigue about going on and reviewing this film is simply because of the fact that we have the main character Joshua, who is a Marvel comic book artist. And he is to be mentored, of course, by none other than Stan Lee himself. Going on and having Stan Lee take Joshua aside, not privately in a room somewhere, just like in a other portion of same room as a number of other people, and going on and telling Joshua, it's like, well, hey, I don't want you to go on and throw your career away over a girl. You true believer. Excelsior. Yeah, like this. Man, if he would have just got on and just thrown any of those lingos and any of those things somewhere in there, like as if like he bizarrely just says it all the time, and maybe it would have just been a tiny little Easter egg like thing, or maybe he would have just said like, "Well, I truly believe," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah." If you would have just gone on and just kind of teased a little bit of that, but anyways, it's unfortunate. But so beyond what is going on with the Marvel comic book side of this story, what really is to be entailing here is we come to find that Joshua is to want to go on and seek out this woman that he keeps seeing nearby where he works in between his lunch hours. And he ends up going on and finding and finally tracking down this woman. And this leads her to all of a sudden get sick, to where he goes on and he tries to take care of her because he wants this woman in a very romantic dating like fashion. And so she ends up getting escorted away from Josh via this ambulance to this supposed hospital. But then Joshua ends up finding out that this woman had not gone on to make it to this hospital. So Joshua's like, okay, where did this woman go? So Joshua is to try to go on and track down this woman and have a sketch that looks kind of closely resembling to the woman, or possibly Veronica from Archie. And that leads Joshua to meet certain detectives like Lieutenant Spencer, which ends up getting played by James Earl Jones. Kind of very funny, weird uh, Disney connection with, of course, James Earl Jones doing the voice of Darth Vader and having a Marvel comic book art. Like, there's a lot of weird, kind of goofy things going on in here, and I can go on and just enjoy the small little weird connections that we're making with this film. And Marvel and Disney and whichever, and Star Wars and all the other kind of stuff. But so, anyways, there are certain points of dialogue where not all of this movie is to also go on and seem true. How can you go on and have Lieutenant Spencer going on and quickly confessing to a character like Joshua that he has gone on and at some point had a nervous breakdown? And to also go on and have the other detective or officer, Malloy, I believe is her name, that goes on, because I don't have a cast list in front of me, and she ends up going on and is to quickly figure out who Joshua is as a artist without going on and to maybe or maybe not have gone on and seen prior sketch of him having that ambulance being drawn to Spencer. Maybe she did go on and check that out or see that. Maybe she is to go on and to have seen that sketch and then go on and know who Josh is via an artist. But so, or maybe she is just a really good person to either profile or size people up. it seems that, bizarrely, Malloy is to be broken down quite quickly of knowing everything about a certain person to the point of them going on and knowing when their bills are due, which I thought was kind of funny. But so, beyond all of that, beyond all these characters, the main story we have here is the woman who had gone on and gotten vanished with that ambulance. We would come to find is to have been specifically taken because she is a diabetic. And this diabetic is to go on and to be experimented on with animal organs to go on and see if there could be a possible cure for her diabetic nature. And so we start to realize that the doctor character that is to be in this movie, who I believe has also gone on and done some work in like soap opera shows. Like I think he was maybe in like The Young and the Restless or something along those lines. But he's just called a doctor in this movie. So we have this doctor that is going on and doing all these experiments upon these people, and that leads us to not only see that this one girl is getting collected, but then seemingly other people who are to go on and have either certain ties with them, either by being diabetic or they are to just be bargaining chips that the doctor is to have to hopefully figure out a way to use against Joshua. And so this story further and further escalates into, at some points, also having just this ambulance go on and either chase after people or crash into people. And it's actually just on top of just having some really just interesting dialogue, I feel, throughout this film, that you can kind of take it and leave it at some points. But like, I was to go on and just be like, okay, like, thankfully this dialogue is good enough for me to just like see what's what throughout this entire story to see how it all plays out. And also goes on and quasi kind of reminds me of all of those kind of like The Car and stuff like that kind of movies also, where you have this one specific vehicle that is going on and going after people, even though, yeah, there are specific ambulance attendees or attendants that are going on and grabbing these people and putting them in the vehicle because they need them for their experiments. So yeah, so with that said, how did I feel about this film? Where can you go on and see it? I honestly thought that this movie was okay. It was a very mid okay, but hey, like, logically, a lot of people can probably feel like a number of different ways about this kind of film, and logically, I was to want to go on and check it out simply because I felt that there was a lot of drastically different things going on and a lot of biased reasoning for me wanting to check it out. But yeah, uh really, I think that this movie in a lot of ways is dialogue and what goes on in it otherwise is just kind of a good enough movie. So definitely gives me a thumbs up with it. And so all the more reason for people to want to go on and just kind of check this out to see if they are to go on and feel the same way. Where you can go on and see this movie right now, currently at the second this recording, uh, first off, you can go on to Pluto TV. That actually is a free app that you can go on and go in there and start watching content, and there's no fee. Like, I went in there and I previously watched another film, and I was like, oh, hey, well, like, I guess this could be another thing that eventually I can go on and just kind of use because it's free anyways. And logically, it's another app that I can go on and kind of find certain content in. So I'm like, all right, great, this is cool. But then on top of that, uh, you can also go on to an app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic, and be able to again watch this movie for absolutely free. Also, I want to go on and state where I'd gone on and found this movie, because I had gone on and I had watched a YouTuber called Comic Tropes, and he is also to have another YouTube channel called Pros and Cons, where they go on and they talk about certain specific films, and don't know exactly where of which one of the videos or whatever had gone on and talked, or whichever channel had talked about this, but yeah, they had talked about the ambulance in that. And so I want to go on and say, like, well, hey, if you want another opinion upon this film, go ahead and check out those channels and just kind of hear what they have to say about movies and stuff like that. And either way, uh this was to be just kind of good enough for me. Hopefully it might just be good enough for you. So with that said, I think it's about that time to just break this movie down in a much more thorough, thick, spoiler like variation, because I think it's about that time to do that song and dance yet again. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about the ambulance, if you were to go on and yourself check it out, or to possibly have heard whatever I had to have said, and maybe felt that you were going to go on and eventually check it out yourself, or whichever. Whatever you want to go on and do, it's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, I think it's about that time to go on and state that it is spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time. I'm going to spoil this review. I'm going to go on and, of course, pause this review here so I can whip out my phone to get whatever is to be either cast listed or noted upon my phone, or to help me figure out a way to remember upon my brain what is to happen within this tale, so I can go on and hopefully break it down in a reasonable amount of time. So with that said, let's pause this, because it's about that time now. Okay. One thing of note has nothing to do with this review, but I had just gone on and today, and this is not a sponsor or anything. I'm just stating this anyways. I had gone on and been involved with a app called Temu, and after seemingly months of going on and playing a certain specific mobile game, finally I'm to go on and get a number of items, 3 items to be specific, free from one of their mobile games. And so yeah, like I'm just so freaking jazzed to finally have like done all of that work to, yeah, just only get free 3 items, but I get them for free and eventually get them shipped here. And so I'm like, yeah. So yeah, it takes for freaking ever um to eventually get to do all of that stuff to go on and get certain items. But man, is it a good just euphoria, or just kind of great, like, yeah, I get these items and I didn't have to pay a lick of them, a dime towards them. So hopefully I can go on and eventually continue to grind and get more items for free, and hopefully I can go on and hopefully get certain items that will go on and help me in the future with either doing thumbnails, or go on and eventually help me with doing YouTube videos. That'd be great at some point. Again, this is not a sponsor. I'm just going on and saying that, like, if you want to go on and if you want to do Temu, go ahead and do so. It'll seem very shady and very janky or whatever, but I'd gone on and I had just been able to get a number of items for free already, and I'm also getting more now. So yeah, it's freaking great. But anyways, let's go on and let's talk about this film. So the very beginning of it, we go on and I think we obviously have the Joshua actor that, like, I'm wondering if what he's kind of talking about is either improvised, or like he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Uh because once we kind of get past this point, like, it never really seems that Joshua ever really has a line or anything about the actual Marvel comic book stuff. Uh, but logically, like, there is to really just have a good actor who is going on to play the Joshua character regardless of knowledge or not. But so Joshua ends up going on and talking to seemingly I'm assuming an artist of a coworker of some sort, and they're going on and they're talking about, hey man, like yeah, we should definitely go on and get some lunch. We can try and reserve a table, something like that. And also, like Josh was telling this guy that it's like, well, hey, yeah, like Spider-Man is a piece of cake to write for. He's tough, he's strong, I don't know, this and that. And so we have the two of them and they're just kind of chit-chatting and they're talking about a meal. But then eventually Joshua is to separate himself from his friend to be like, oh no, no, hey man, like, how about you go on and you go ahead and I'll go and I'll catch up with you because I want to finally meet up with this girl and actually talk with her because every time I go on and I see her like passing by, like there's always so many people around her, or there is to be just not a way for me to go on and easily get to her, and because of the hustle and bustle of just the city of New York that they live in. And so we have Joshua who is seeing his opportunity now to finally get to this girl who is um, Cheryl in this film. So we we get to where Josh is trying to track down this woman, and so he is to of course go on and lay it on really thick here, and so Joshua first goes on and grabs this girl and asks her, it's like, well, hey, are you like with somebody? Are you married? This or that? And the girl's like, who are you? kind of thing. So we have Joshua that ends up telling this girl, it's like, well, hey, there's been so many times that every day I'd gone on and kind of seen you, but I always lose you in a crowd. And so we have the two of them, and they're making their way through the streets. At even one point, Cheryl is to like start to almost kind of cross the street, but then also Joshua is to say, "Hey, hey, hey, wait! Uh, like this. I think this bus was coming or something like that." So he ends up grabbing her and he kind of pushes her off to the side, and it's like, "Hey, I just saved your life." And now that I've gone on and done so, like the least thing that you can do is just offer me lunch. Um, so grab an arm. And the girl is just like, no, like, no, no, no. So Joshua is just like, okay, like, why are you going on and just kind of being uh, the way you're being? Like, are you just mad because I didn't go on and I didn't give you a present for your birthday? Is that what it is? And so we then have Joshua who rushes to this stand of these people that are kind of pawning off these items. And one of the items ends up being this watch and this Sony Walkman. And this like yellow Sony Walkman that ends up just being like dropped on the ground and broken anyways. It's kind of funny. So we turn around and we have Joshua who hands these girls or this girl this gift, and this girl is to go on and immediately want to go and tell Joshua here that's like, well, hey, like, I'm not interested in dating you or anyone else. And so we then have Joshua's like, well, hey, like, Well, just kind of think about it this way. Like, don't you ever want to go on and have somebody that you can take to the doctors with, to have somebody wait on you in a waiting room, like have somebody really take that time to really just care about you. And so they go on and they drop the Walkman and it falls onto the ground. And so Joshua then goes on and hands this Walkman to this kind of homeless man who is asking for money. And in the distance, we see this doctor who is in, I'm assuming, this limo, and he rolls the window down, and he's going on and making a phone call saying, like, okay, uh, like, let's go on and let's get this girl. As we then turn around and we start to see that Cheryl is starting to look fairly sick. And Joshua is like, okay, wait a minute, like what's going on? And the girl's like, yeah, I'm feeling very, very dizzy. And he's like, well, yeah, like you look really sick. And so Cheryl goes on and she collapses onto the ground. And so Joshua ends up taking his blazer off and putting it underneath her head as a kind of pillow. And so Joshua ends up calling for the people to call for an ambulance. And we have Meryl that ends up telling, or Cheryl, that ends up telling Joshua, it's like, well, yeah, I guess I should stop going on and having so many margaritas in one day or something like that. And Joshua's like, well, hey, like, maybe not stop, but maybe kind of back down on drinking so many of those unless you have somebody to drink them with. So oh, she says martini, not margarita. My bad. So the ambulance makes their way here, and this, of course, is to be the ambulance that is to be the evil ambulance with the ambulance attendants that are going on and taking this woman because she is to be the diabetic person. But we don't realize that until we have Cheryl that goes on and is to be seen by this evilish maniacal doctor that is to have had this plan of transplanting her organs with animal organs to see if he can go on and cure her diabetes. And so Joshua goes on and he turns to these ambulance attendees and ends up telling, hey, yeah, guys, like we were just walking and she collapsed. And uh, Cheryl ends up going on and telling the ambulance attendants that, uh, like, hey, like I was on my way to the doctor anyways, and also like I'm diabetic. So Joshua ends up going on while Cheryl is getting carted away here, and he's like, okay, well, I need to know like at least your name. Like you got to tell me what your name is. And so she says Cheryl, and then Joshua was like, okay, but what is your last name? And she says, but, and he's like, what was that? And she gets into the ambulance car and she ends up stating that it's Barry Shalkovov. And so Joshua's going on and the door has slammed on the ambulance door, and he's like, okay, like I'll meet you at St. Francis at 6 o'clock, because that's what he thought that she said. But no, she was saying her last name, that is to be this long stretched out thing. And so he assumed something about 6 o'clock. So Joshua goes on and he goes back to his art, his Marvel comics. And so he's having this pencil and he's at this window and he then turns to Stan Lee and goes on and tells him, like, hey man, like, would you mind if I kind of knock off a little bit early today? Like, I'm very distracted. And so Stan is like, oh, hey, well, uh like where are you going? And so Joshua's like, oh, I'm just going on, and I'm going and seeing a girl in a hospital. And Stan goes on and says, like, well, personally, I like my women healthy. But go on and just go. So uh kind of a little funny, like, funny jab, a little funny joke here. And so Joshua makes his way to the hospital, and he has flowers with him. So Joshua goes on, and he is to be asking this receptionist, of course, about this girl named Cheryl, and that she had gone on and collapsed at this certain specific address. I think it was 57th and 5th Avenue. So, and she had supposedly been brought in around 1:15 in the afternoon. And so this receptionist goes on and states, like, well, like, you know what, it's all good and great and all that you are telling me that this girl's name is Cheryl, but the fact of the matter is, we go on and we log in everyone's name via their last name. So logically, you could not have gone on and just kind of searched via the first name whatsoever. How is it not in any bit of information the person's first name? That just seems kind of weird. That just seems kind of a weird kind of way of them trying to figure out how to not get this guy to meet this girl so soon. But so Josh is going on and seeing that this receptionist is trying to look up this girl's bit of information. And Joshua is to also state, it's like, well, hey, like, maybe you can narrow it down, the search of this girl, with the fact of the matter of it is that she is to also be diabetic. And so we then go on and have Joshua that's kind of getting nowhere from this receptionist. And so Joshua then goes on and is to meet this other nurse like woman, or doctor woman. I'm not quite sure what her actual title is. But so Joshua goes on and meets with this woman, and she ends up stating that there hasn't been anybody here since 10 o'clock this morning, and that also no one has been diabetic and made their way to this part of the hospital. And so Josh goes on and kind of re-explains what he'd already explained to that other receptionist about where she was, that she had gone and collapsed, this and that. And so, and Josh would also asked this woman if this is the only St. Francis hospital. So, and they're also kind of like the nurse is like thinking, like, well, did she get hurt? It's like, no, she just fell, she just collapsed. So the lady then goes on and she's to rationalize that there is no way from where the address that was to have had her collapse that they had gone on to rationalize heading their way to this specific hospital. If anything, there should have been another hospital, I believe, who is to be called Roosevelt. And so we have this doctor that is stating here, it's like, well, more than likely she had gone to that hospital because it makes the most sense, and go over there and just kind of bother them to see if they are to have this woman there. So we then have Joshua, who of course goes to this Roosevelt hospital. And we have Joshua that goes on and is to be asked by this man, okay, like, what kind of relationship do you have with this patient? And Joshua is like, well, I'm a friend. Immediately that goes on and tells us, dude, you're going to get really just quickly just shot out just because you're not a relative. You're not a husband. You're not a this. You're not a that. So now with Cheryl. Cheryl is going on and she's tied up here. And she's going on and speaking with the doctor. That is to only be called the doctor for some goofy reason. So, of course, Cheryl is to be fairly concerned why she's tied up and if she can go on and get a phone call as if this is some weird, goofy prison sentence. So, we have this doctor that goes on and he tells Cheryl that he's going on and doing things at his secret hospital that no other hospital is going on and doing. And he goes on to reveal that he is going to possibly cure Cheryl's diabetes. And we have Cheryl that goes on and looks at this man. It's like, okay, like that clearly just is not possible. And so he goes on and states that there's a possibility that with a pig pancreas that there's ability that could change. And so and because of that there's never a need for insulin ever again. But so we go on and we have Cheryl who is just thinking that this doctor is mad and she's thinking that this is to be in a normal hospital. So she's going on and crying out for help, but no one is going to help her. And that just leads the doctor to go on and say, it's like, well, hey, like, you're going on and upsetting all the other patients. Like, you should go on and uh, just kind of relax because, like, there's no help for you here. So and the doctor has to also go on and explain that there are several other people besides just her that are also getting experimented on, and eventually all of these patients will eventually go on and get killed like she will for being experimented on, because more than likely the animal organs will probably be rejected by the human body, and a lot of these people will probably end up dying. But hey, more than likely, if anything, their body parts will probably be sold um, to all these other hospitals, because it seems that every single one of these hospitals also have these kind of just experimental kind of black market hospital things kind of going on, is what we kind of find out. So we turn around and we have Joshua who goes on to speak to the police. He goes to the police to try to fill out a missing persons report of this girl, Cheryl. Um, but he doesn't know her full name. And so eventually, this whole missing persons investigation lands on Lieutenant Spencer's desk, so to speak. And so he ends up having to forcibly needing to know Joshua's kind of story here. And so Spencer ends up going and talking to Joshua about, like, well, hey, comic books? Like, you make up comic books. Well, like, if anything, like, it seems that Spencer is to like kind of the classic ones, but kind of the more modern ones are to kind of weird him out. Uh, to the point of him not wanting to go on and read any of those. And so eventually, here's where Spencer kind of takes Joshua aside and starts to confide in him and confess. The fact of the matter is that he was to have gone on and had one point a nervous breakdown. And Joshua is like, well, hey, yeah, like I can understand, like you're in a very stressful position, and suicide rates are really high, and you're in a lot of pressure, and we have Spencer that kind of reiterates, like, well, no, like I didn't mention all of that stuff, like I just mentioned I had a nervous breakdown, and so and he's probably more than likely saying all this because he knows that Joshua like will not stop until all of these things are answered, and more than likely there may not be a way to logically answer this case. So, and Joshua can also go on and just kind of sympathize uh with Spencer in a way because he himself is to be under things like deadlines where he is to go on and have 11 panels that are to be done by Friday, and he goes on and is to just kind of be under the gun. But so, but the fact of the matter is, uh, Joshua can't get this woman's just kind of look out of his mind, out of his head. So, to the point of even Joshua going on and to have sketched this girl and is to hand it over to Spencer, just like, well, hey, like, if you can't go on and know how to figure out how to get to this girl, like, maybe I can hand you over a sketch so you can go on and find this girl. And Spencer looks at it and he's like, you know what? Like, he starts talking about Archie comic books, bizarrely. And he's like, you know what? This girl looks exactly like Veronica from Archie. And then he also states that there is a cop in the homicide division that looks just like Jughead. And they end up bizarrely, I think, just calling him consistently Jughead throughout this entire thing, or they end up making a joke of the fact of like, you know what, this guy's head looks just really familiar to me, and then it's the Jughead guy. So, but then also we have Joshua who's stating like, well, it's not like Veronica. Veronica looks like a little bit different. She has bangs, or she has makeup, or she has this, or she has that. So we now have Spencer that's like, okay, like let's look at it this way. The ambulance had gone on and picked her up, right? Where did they put her? Where did she go? Maybe they lost her. And Josh was like, they lost her? And logically, we have Spencer who's like, well, hey, maybe she fell out. Maybe she stopped the ambulance and said that she was fine and she got out. Hey, any logical reasoning for her to have not made it to this hospital? Let's kind of throw caution to the wind here and just kind of think tank or brainstorm to possibly think how this girl did not make it to this hospital. And so the two of them are going on and they're thinking it out here. And so we then also have Joshua is like, well, hey, at least let me go on and also like let me at least like sketch you out this ambulance because if anything, this ambulance is kind of very old looking and very distinct. And so Spencer's like, well, could I stop you from from sketching this? It's like, no. So like you might as well just kind of go on and just kind of do it anyways. So while that's going on, we have all of a sudden Malloy who's going on and she's talking to Spencer. And honestly, like this scene here is kind of hilarious in a way. It's kind of funny. Because Malloy ends up going on and telling Spencer, it's like, well, hey, like, don't forget you have a 4 o'clock dentist appointment. And so Spencer then jumps up and is annoyed with Malloy of the fact that, like, well, hey, like, why is it every time I have cavities, you know about them before I do? Uh, and like, he is just so baffled and just so like irritated by this woman. And then Malloy goes on and says, like, oh yeah, also like, your insurance payment is due today. Like, does Malloy go on and rifle through Spencer's mail? And like, does she like is she that much of a detective that she just won't let anything go? And so she needs to know everything about everybody. And that makes her a good detective, but that also would make a lot of people just kind of like, I'm gonna get as far away as I can from this woman because, good God, like nothing, I guess, is secret or a private thing from her, I guess, because she needs to just know everything. So we have Spencer that goes on and is to go back with Joshua. It's like, well, hey, uh, are you kind of done kind of drawing or sketching that whole thing? And so we again have Spencer who's looking still at that Cheryl picture. It's like, well, yeah, it still looks like Veronica. But then they go on and they look at the ambulance picture and they end up realizing that the ambulance is like, man, this is a very old looking ambulance. Doesn't quite make sense for this to be still out there and operational. So Joshua goes on, and after kind of having these sketches, and Spencer's going to kind of look into this ambulance because it's fairly unique. Joshua then walks off, and then is all of a sudden to see Malloy, and again, like Joshua can't go on uh, and let a woman kind of from his eye line not be like a woman that he has to go on and not just try and talk to or hit on or something because even though he has this one woman that he's fantasizing about, like, hey, like he's not holding a wedding ring to her or anything. So logically, this guy is still going on and seeing any woman just like, hey, like, if anything, I like that this girl is just so uh, like intriguing, interesting, and so the two of them start to talk together, and so Malloy ends up telling Joshua that he's really not much of a good witness, and some of the stuff that he was to specifically tell Spencer was not exactly convincing. And we have Joshua that turns around and tells Malloy here about the fact of him realizing that it seems that everybody's kind of going out of their way to not really trust what Joshua is saying and figure out ways to either discredit him or figure out a way to just kind of write him off so they can't go on and justify solving his case and write it off as some just cold case that is to just go nowhere because no one cares. Uh, and plus, also, like, it takes a number of days for a missing person to logically have any kind of real importance to take care of, as far as a case is to be concerned. So we then have Malloy, who is starting to follow Joshua as he makes his way out. And so Malloy is like, you know what, like, this girl must have, like, really struck you, to the point of you going and you doing all of this legwork to, like, figure out what happened to her. And that also, it seems that Joshua is to be more different than any of the other guys that come through this precinct, because they are to go on and have everything connected with some kind of conspiracy, or some kind of lunatic, like, story that makes no real rational sense about aliens, or being probed by them, or whichever. And so, or maybe that aliens were going on and driving that ambulance and this and that. And going on and even further asking, it's like, well, hey, like, who was driving the ambulance? Like, the people in the ambulance, what do they look like? And it's like, well, guys in uniform. Like, guys in normal uniforms. Like, so we then have Joshua that is asking Malloy here. It's like, well, hey, like, you are kind of an attractive woman. Like, what would a woman like you want to go on and become a cop for? And so, like, we're again kind of getting a backstory of this character, kind of setting up that eventually this character will be eventually even more important, because this eventually Spencer will be taking a further and further vanishing act when it comes in the later part of the film, sadly enough. So we have Malloy here that goes on and states that when she was young, she always ended up feeling like a potential victim. But then eventually, when she eventually go on to gain things like a badge and a gun and a pair of handcuffs, she didn't feel like such a victim anymore. And so we have Joshua who's like, well, hey, ever shoot anybody? And Malloy is just like, no, but there's always hope. So here's the one problem I have with this movie. We supposedly have Joshua. And I bring this up because we have Stanley and Joshua talking about this character in the scene that's coming up here. And so they supposedly, Stanley or whoever, goes on and comes up with the character Dr. Strong, which sounds like a very dumb name to logically never, I feel, ever become an actual Marvel character. And if there legitimately is a Marvel character that has this name, that is the stupidest thing. And I hope that the character, like, never lasted anything beyond a page, to just be a throwaway villain for somebody to face off against. But Doctor Strong is such a stupid name, and then the way the character is designed is stupid. It's very simple, and it obviously was just kind of a throwaway character. No offense to whoever was the artist who have done this, or maybe uh, put together this, because who knows, maybe it could have been a really substantial artist, and I'm just kind of bad mouthing them right now for this goofy character they were probably forced to put together. Uh, Logically, you could have gone on and had a character with a much more, like, uh, interesting name, like Madam Medic, or uh, or Dr. Scalpel, or like Dr. uh Maniac or something, or something more catchy, like something that kind of deals with uh a doctorial or doctrine word. You could have easily have called him Dr. Doctorial. I don't know, Dr. Flatline, or I don't know, you could have done anything beyond just Dr. Strong. That sounds stupid. But then also any of the names that I probably came up were probably stupid anyways. But anyways, moving on. So we have Joshua that is going on, and he is calling upon this hospital to try and figure out ways to find Cheryl within these hospitals. And the more and more that he starts to question these certain hospitals, the more they can't give out these specific things of information. And he goes on, and the further he questions, the more he realizes the less amount of information that they can give. So he's like, well, hey, you're a hospital. Shouldn't you be able to give out any kind of information? So Stanley ends up pulling Josh aside and be like, hey, like losing something, Josh? And so Josh ends up showing Stanley this sketch, and it's yeah, uh like her, like this girl, like I'm trying to find her, and the more and more I keep looking, the more that there is just a dead end after dead end. And so Stan looks at the picture and is like, well, what, some loss. So Stanley ends up turning to Joshua and just be like, well, hey, like, you gonna go on and get some real legit work done today? Like, come on, man. Like, you really gonna go on and like put pen to paper? Because hey, man, we got a deadline, and also like the further and further you're just here, like, and I put a lot of potential in giving you this Doctor Strong thing, and you're probably throwing it away in a girl. Like this may go on and cost you not only this woman but also your job, and that's what kind of accumulates within this bit of dialogue here. But Joshua is going on and stating to Stanley, it's like, well, hey, yeah, like every time I'm to go on and need to sketch a woman within a comic book, it just ends up being her. So like, I feel like I'm just gonna end up uh, just kind of ruining every book that I just kind of put together. And so Stan is going on and just like, you know what, like let's go on and let's just kind of let's talk. Let's kind of talk over here. So here's where they go on and we have standards like, well, hey, like I gave you this big opportunity to put this whole book together, and Josh was like, well, yeah, like haven't I given enough to this company, like nights, weekends, whatever you needed? And so Sandy's like, well, yeah, like I get that, but it's like you got to work out your own problems at your own time, like not be here and kind of working. So like going on and telling like Joshua, it's like, well, hey, like outside the office, like you have to go on and kind of figure out how you can kind of uh, figure out this whole mystery thing on your own. So Joshua then turns around and he starts handing out all of these sketches, and he goes on to be asking everybody, have you seen this girl? Do you know this girl? This and that. So eventually, after going on and asking all these people if they know this girl, eventually that finally leads to Joshua meeting a girl that is to be Cheryl's roommate. And I believe her name is Geraldine here. And so we have Joshua that goes on and talks to, I believe, Geraldine, and we have Joshua go on and say, it's like, well, hey, like, here's the thing that I'm gonna kind of set up for you. So, because I kind of know where this girl has probably been missing, and so like your roommate, like she's been gone for a couple days now, and you're worried, right? And like you want answers, and so and like they go on and they order this pina colada, and Joshua ends repeating to the waiter, it's like, well, yeah, she would like a pina colada. What does it matter of what he has to state her drink? But I don't know, it's kind of some weird goofy thing. um and so Joshua is to also tell this roommate that it's, well, hey, uh like I'm going to tell you now like how I kind of know this girl, and like I know her because she is to have stated that she is to have been a diabetic. and and the roommate is like, oh well, like, yeah, normally she didn't go on and tell people that, even strangers. And and so Joshua is like, well, yeah, like if anything, I'm just to be a friend with her, like you have gone on and already been. So like realize that you and I are just kind of concerned friends, and like we're wanting to go on and kind of see what had happened to her. And so Geraldine goes on and states that the two of them had gone on and worked in this office together, and it seems that the two of them had both go on and put their insulin in this refrigerator, and at one point they would go on and kind of confuse one another uh, with their kind of insulin, because they're kind of one and the same, because they would end up just kind of stacking one another insulin right next to one another. And so Joshua was just kind of like, well, wait a minute, like, so you're a diabetic also? Like, maybe you're gonna go on and probably be a threat sometime soon. So, but then also his concern is like, well, hey, like, could somebody have gone on and found that insulin and kind of tampered with it, and like made her ill and sick to the point of her needing uh, a reason to call the ambulance? And so we then go on and we have Joshua, who's telling this girl, Geraldine, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what? Like, I'm not trying to give you any kind of like scare tactics or conspiracies or whatever. Like, you know what? Like, how about you go on and like you try and you go on and you call your friend and probably see if she's home. And maybe this can all just resolve itself. So go ahead, just call your friend and see if she's home. And so he even goes on and gives her a quarter. So the girl ends up going on and be like, I don't want your money. And so she ends up going on and calling her friend, and come to find out in the answering machine, we do go on and have uh Cheryl Sherilyn that ends up going on and talking to Geraldine, or Cheryl, that goes on and talks to Geraldine and ends up leaving her this message. And so uh, the message ends up states, "It's me. Like, I'm sorry to make a problem for you. I'm in trouble. uh, gotta see, or you have to go on and see me at 8:30 at the uh, carriage stable. Don't go on and call the cops. It'll only make things worse. Uh, and so Geraldine ends up hanging the phone up, and she realizes, like, well, yeah, like something really is going wrong here. And the doctor did go on and speak with Gerald or Cheryl and state that she was going to go on and get this phone call, but he wanted to go and tell her that she was going to have to speak specifically with what he wanted her to say, because they were kind of preparing to get to her roommate because her roommate is also a diabetic. So we have Josh who's like, well, hey, like, did you, what happened? What happened on the phone call? Like, did you get her? Like, tell me, like, what happened? So Geraldine ends up stating to Joshua, it's like, well, hey, like, I didn't get her, but I got a message from her. So, uh, Geraldine ends up telling Joshua, it's like, well, hey, like, they said they wanted me to come alone, but hey, like, since you're not a cop, like, how about we kind of go together here? And And so Josh was like, well, hey, yeah, that's fine. No cops, but where are you taking me? Like, I want to go on and I want to help not only you, but like, I want to help this girl that I've been tracking down for I don't know how freaking long now for this entire goddamn day. So Geraldine ends up telling Joshua as they make it to this stable that this, of course, where Cheryl Lynn, or Cheryl Lynn, Cheryl had gone on and worked for the weekends at this stable. And so we have, of course, Joshua that is still wanting to go on and I believe figure out Cheryl's last name. And so we go on and we have Geraldine that goes on to go to the stable, is kind of poking and kind of looking around and is calling for Cheryl and ends up kind of going on and asking if the stable had kind of closed early. So Geraldine ends up getting sucked into the stable, and it seems that now Geraldine is yelling and screaming. And so Josh ends up kind of pulling like Thor from Ragnarok when he was kind of battling with the Hulk, where he goes on and says like Banner, I'll get you out. Where Josh is like, okay, like I'm out here, like I'll get you out. So Joshua is trying to like smash into the door, trying to get it open, trying to get it ajar. And all of a sudden, we come to find that this ambulance ends up crashing from this door, and Josh leaps out of the way. And then all of a sudden, this ambulance comes driving wildly out. And then all of a sudden, all these horses come from out of the stable. So the ambulance is driving off with Geraldine and the back of this ambulance. So Joshua then goes on and he meets with this police officer and he tells this guy this whole story of what has gone on to happen. And so the cop is trying to figure out some rational reasoning for maybe some vandals or uh, maybe 3 or 4 times a month horses had gone on uh, and kind of gotten out for whatever reason. And so we have Joshua's like, well, no, like, if anything, like, you have to realize that somebody had gotten kidnapped. And we then have the cop was like, well, hey, you said the word kidnapped? And Josh is like, come on. So, like, that's all he kind of retained from what he had said. So Joshua was like, well, hey, like, it's obviously like this guy doesn't really like understand what's going on here. So Joshua ends up telling this cop, it's like, well, hey, like, if you know Lieutenant Spencer, go on and call him and tell him what had happened here, because he already knows what's going on. So, like, we also have Joshua that had is going on and to have called Lieutenant Spencer and is hoping that he's going to get a call back from him, some kind of answer. So Joshua goes on and he's at his home now, like, okay, come on, Spencer, call me, ring my phone, I will answer. It's very goofy and very weird. And he's like, come on, buzz, come on, like, do your job, Spencer, come on. And so what ends up happening is that Joshua falls asleep by his table, and like he is just now just kind of his body is just aching so badly for the fact that he had fallen asleep on this chair. So Joshua getting up and not knowing any better is going on and trying to make himself some coffee and pouring himself some milk, and all of a sudden he starts drinking out of this cup and realize that his milk has gotten poisoned. So Joshua's going on and starting to stumble and fall, and he's desperately trying to make it to his neighbor Patty. And him and Patty is, I guess, had some history dating together, and so she ends up bringing this up that at one point they had dated and they had been to this concert and this and that, and things just wound up poorly. And so Joshua is just kind of in desperation to get to Patty before he passes out. And so uh, Joshua is like, hey, Patty, I'm sick. And so Patty's like, oh yeah, you do look horrible. And Joshua's like, well, yeah, there's something inside me that needs to get out. And so Joshua ends up running to this trash can that's out of Patty's apartment building and or out of this apartment room, and he just kind of grabs this one trash can and starts barfing out. And that's when Patty's like, well, hey, like, we dated once, this and that, but all of a sudden you want to come to my place to just barf? Like, what's going on? So the more and more that Joshua is just very ill and very sick and just kind of stumbling around, the more that other people in this apartment complex are coming to Josh's aid or Josh's assistance. And people are going on and they're even starting to call the ambulance. And Josh is like, no, don't call the ambulance. Like, I'm probably going to die if they take me. So, but if anything, also, Josh was mentioning how, like, somebody had poisoned him. So, uh, people are also stating that maybe Joshua is going to have convulsions and swallow his tongue, but none of that ever happens. So, the ambulance guys make their way to Josh, and Josh is holding on to the stairs, not letting these guys take him on this gurney because he realizes that he's going to disappear if doing so. So, Joshua, the more that he rustles away from these ambulance attendees, and he's telling these people that they're going to kill him, and Joshua is going on and stating that Patty is going to be his witness to these ambulance drivers and what they look like. and this and that. So Joshua gets hauled away via this ambulance, and he wakes up and he's seemingly having these doctors kind of look up at him, and there's possibility that they're kind of either performing surgery on him or finishing up things. So Joshua ends up waking up, and like he's desperately trying to make his way out of this hospital. And here's also just kind of fun dialogue here where Joshua is trying to figure things out. And immediately when Joshua makes it out of this hospital room and he turns and he sees Spencer, immediately Joshua is looking at Spencer. He's like, "Oh man, you're a part of this. You're part of the conspiracy." And we have Spencer who's like, "Well, hey, yeah, I guess I was to have mentioned about my breakdown, but it seems like you're having one of your own. Like it didn't seem like long enough before that was going to happen. Now does it or did it?" So, but yeah, but Spencer is like, "Well, yeah, we're all in on it. We're all yeah, this conspiracy of yours. Yeah, like this nurse is in on it, this orderly's in on it, I'm in on it, everyone's in on it." So the entire hospital staff, the New York Police Department, everybody is all in on this. Yeah. So so Spencer is going on and grabbing Josh here. It's like, well, hey, like you ended up getting picked up from an ambulance that is to not be the same as that other ambulance. And you were brought here to the Chambers General Hospital, and you've been out of your mind for the last 3.5 hours. So we have Spencer that's going on and trying to convince Josh, like, oh, hey, man, like, just kind of calm down. Just go on and just freaking go back to your bed and just kind of relax. Like, so we have Spencer that's going on and stating that at one point Joshua had gone on and broken either things at his apartment or also just kind of broken things like during this hospital visit. And it's like, well, hey man, like you better have really good medical insurance or even just insurance in general, because man, like, paying out a fortune for all the stuff that you broke. So as well as also him having work insurance. So but also like Spencer is saying that at some point Joshua is going to need psychiatric insurance as well, because he's gonna uh, be needing to get that covered for a very long time. I'm sure. Just like, hey man, we're gonna figure out a way to just kind of haul this guy away. So, because also like Spencer doesn't really quite understand like if logically if Joshua is to try and end himself here, or maybe there's something really else going on. And that it could just be all in his mind, or there's something actually really happening here. And so Spencer can't quite put the pieces together and figure it out. So we have Joshua who's saying, like, well, hey, like, but the guys who end up bringing me here, like, they were the guys in that ambulance, right? They had to have been the same guys. And so Spencer's like, well, hey, well, like let's go on and let's bring them in here and see if they are the same guys. Like if anything, the guys are just wearing the same outfits, but they're not the same exact guys. We come to find out later that one of the guys is actually to be a Cuban or Samoan guy, I believe. Uh, and so yeah, it doesn't quite match the two guys that are to have brought Joshua in here. So Joshua looks at the guys like, well, maybe they aren't the actual guys because it seems like they are nice guys. And so uh, the ambulance attendees are just like, well, hey man, like I hope you feel better. Let's get the heck out of here. So now we have this nurse that is to come in here, and I believe her name is uh Nurse Feinstein, which sounds like a very traditional name that I've gone on and heard a number of different things. It's like, why does this name sound so familiar? Because I feel like I've heard it so often. So we have Feinstein that goes on and states that uh, that Joshua had gone on and supposedly had his stomach pumped, but there wasn't much left in there. There was much to really justify a stomach pumping, and Josh was like, "Well, hey, I was poisoned. Believe me, I was poisoned." And so, uh, we have Spencer that is going on and is going and questioning certain people that Joshua had kind of been with as far as uh, his apartment people that he lived with, and specifically Patty, who is to be a kind of witness of what was going on, but then also is to specifically know Joshua. And so he goes on and he mentions about how Joshua is a much bit of a loner guy, and but then also that Joshua is not quite normal. So Joshua ends up saying like, well, yeah, like let's finally admit it. Let's confess now. Like I had gone on and I'd killed Cheryl and her roommate, and 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 I guess there is no ambulance after all. Like all these people are just kind of missing, and there's no real just kind of answer for any of that. So Spencer's going on and telling the nurse here that's like, well, hey, like you're gonna go on, you're gonna look after him. It's like, okay, great, like he's my problem. Like I can't wait to just go on and just kind of knock him out with the sleeping drugs I'm gonna have to put him in because eventually what is gonna be his roommate. So and he ends up calling her Florence Nightmare. It's kind of funny. So Joshua ends up going on and he ends plopping into his bed. And so the guy next to him called Elias is talking about how they're trying to kill him too. And Josh was like, what? So we come to find that the guy luckily sitting or kind of uh, in bed next to him is to be this reporter who's desperately wanting to go on and know Joshua's story because it sounds like uh, Joshua's story is kind of rather interesting. How Joshua is losing his mind and has probably gone on and killed people and this and that. And Joshua was like, no, like that's not the story. Like, if anything, I'm going to tell you the actual story, and it's a story about this whole ambulance angle. And Elias is just like, yeah, no, like I don't want any bit of that story. That doesn't sound like a good story. So, but like Elias is to go on and just be like, well, hey, yeah, like if anything, like I think I can go on and just kind of figure out a way to sell this story, and I'll probably make a good buck out of it, and this and that. So it's like, well, hey, like you better go on and give me the exclusive to this whole story, so I just have something to write. So like in a very nutshell, that's kind of what all is to be said here. So, uh, let's go on and fast track it because I know that there's a lot of stuff that I have to kind of wrap up here, and I think this movie's only an hour and a half, and I've probably not even made halfway much progress here. So, like it is kind of funny how like we have the nurse coming back and is asking Elias like, well, hey, like, what are you doing out of bed? And he's like, my Jane Fonda workout, and so the nurse ends up asking Elias like, well, hey, like, have you peed? And he's like, well, yeah, I'm 73 years old. I've peed enough. So, uh, we have the nurse who's nurse Florenstein or Florenstein. Man, that name is just hard to remember. Uh, Nurse Feinstein, my bad. And so she ends up going on to be kind of the lookout while this nurse goes on, and she ends up getting a break. So we come to find that this cop ends up making his way to talk to nurse uh, Feinstein, and he ends up talking to her about certain specific paperwork and how he's going on and needing to uh, get to this one patient and this and that. And so the further and further that they talk, this leads to Florentine just saying to this officer, "I was like, well, hey, would you like some coffee?" And so he's like, well, yeah, I'd love some coffee. So the two of them go into this place where they're to go on and get coffee, and he ends up taking this nightstick and he chokes her out. And so what we are to supposedly figure out is that Hugo, this cop here, that's actually one of the guys working for the doctor, he ends up going on and needing this woman because she's a diabetic. Also, we come to find out. And so the two other ambulance attendees are trying to go on and haul away Joshua while he's sleeping, while he's being, of course, drugged with sleep drugs. And Elias overhears what's going on, and he overhears what's going on because he can't sleep anyways, because I guess his friend Joshua probably snores louder than he does. Because, funny enough, we have Elias that just kind of wakes up and he's like, wait a minute, like, I'm awake and I'm snoring. How is this possible? And so he realizes that it's coming from Joshua. So Elias goes on and he notices that these guys are kind of trying to grab Joshua, and Elias is like, well, wait a minute, like, I'm not gonna just go on and let this guy just be taken by these guys. So, because they say that they're moving him to another room, but Elias doesn't believe that at all. So, uh, Elias goes on and he ends up pulling this fire alarm, and so Elias is like, well, hey, man, sue me. So, while these guys are now forced to evacuate this building, we have Elias that brings back Joshua to this room, and we then have one of the orderlies that is going on and asking these two guys in this room, hey, have you gone on and you seen Feinstein? And they're saying that, like, that she's missing from her station. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, man. Like, why are you coming to me and asking me? So the orderly ends up spotting that that Joshua doesn't have his IV in his arm, and so he adjusts his arm, and then also talks about the enema bag that he's going to give him later. So they end up possibly stating that maybe the nurse had kind of left for the day, and the kind of orderly the is to go on to say like, well, like she wouldn't have left without her insulin. It's like, aha, like she was a diabetic also. So why are all these people like? Why are they all connected with being diabetics? Why is this all connected here? So we then turn around, and so Elias is stating to Joshua, it's like, well, hey, you know what? Like, we need to figure out a way to get out of here. Like, we need to fully get out of this hospital because these guys are going to come back and they're going to be looking for Joshua. So, if anything, Joshua asks Elias, like, well, hey, I don't have any clothes, and Elias is like, well, hey, I'll go shopping, and like, there's a guy over here that was to have a nice suit, and he'll probably fit your frame. So the two of them go on and they're wearing these clothes and they're making it out of this elevator. And so Elias is acting like he's distraught, and Josh is to comfort him like some grieving family member. And so Elias is talking about how this woman gone on and been the love of his life and slept with him and and this and that, and he wished that he would have gone on and married her and this and that. So forcing these people to go on and be none the wiser as they make their way out of this hospital. So the two of them go on and they make it onto this cab, and so Elias is going on and telling the cabbie to go to New York Post, South Street by the river. So they're going on and they're figuring out a way to probably track down how many diabetics have gone missing lately in a certain specific area. And also, like, Josh is possibly having some suspicions about whether or not to go on and actually trust Elias because he's maybe just in it for the story. And Elias is like, well, hey, like, haven't you known me for long enough to realize that, like I've kind of done okay by you so far? And so both of them make their way to the New York Post, and they come to find that there's a specific entrance that is locked past 9 o'clock. So they have to make their way to the employee entrance. So they come to realize that all of a sudden, off in the distance, that the ambulance car has parked nearby, and so they're like, "Hey, here's our opportunity to get the photo of this ambulance." And uh, to probably kind of catch these guys in the act or something like that. So Elias is going on and going over to the ambulance car to take pictures of it. And so Elias ends up realizing that his camera isn't working. He's trying to take photos, but it's not working well. So, uh, but then also Josh is thinking like maybe they shouldn't go over there because maybe it's just kind of waiting for them to just get nabbed or whatever. So Elias is going on and it's like, well, hey, like, uh, there is that kind of just there's that kind of phone booth nearby. How about you go over there and you call uh that crazy lieutenant detective guy that you know about, and have him come down here and kind of either arrest these guys or just like have this whole thing to just be kind of having him bring in the cavalry and this and that, and like have them just arrest these guys. So Joshua is telling Elias here, it's like, well, hey, like, uh, if anything, you're not going to go and just take a picture of this ambulance by yourself. You're going to go over with me to this phone booth. So Elias is like, okay, I'll go on and I'll go with you. So that way they can be together, because if they separate, more than likely one of them is going to get nabbed or go missing or whatever. So, uh, Alliance ends up asking Joshua, it's like, well, hey, do you remember the number of the detective? And so Joshua's like, well, yeah, I've only called him like a dozen more times. So I think it was like 25 was the number of how many times he stated that he called him. So Joshua ends up going on and he tries to get a hold of Spencer. And oddly enough, Spencer ends up having his own car phone, and they end up like talking to one another. And so, because they patched him into his car bizarrely. So Spencer is saying to Joshua, it's like, well, hey, I've been looking for you. And so Spencer ends up saying that it's like, okay, like now that this poor Feinstein nurse is now missing, like Spencer is thinking that now Joshua probably has a connection to these missing people, and so he wants to go on and bring Joshua in on suspicion. But Joshua is wanting to go on and tell Spencer, it's like, well, hey, the ambulance is right here. Like, if anything, like, come on down and like just see that this ambulance is right here. Like, I'm gonna give you the address. And Spencer's like, okay, I'm 6 minutes away, so stay put and don't go anywhere. So, but then also Joshua is telling Spencer, it's like, well, hey, call for backup, lots of it. Like, all right, like, come on, like, freaking send the cavalry here to kind of take these guys down. And Spencer's like, whatever. So again, another like thing for Spencer to just kind of ignore Josh again. So, oh well, Josh is distracted calling Spencer on the phone. We turn around, we have Linus, who is to finally get his camera to work, and so he gets closer to the ambulance, which gets him sucked into the ambulance by Hugo and the two other men, and they end up chloroforming Elias and dragging him into the ambulance, as we had Elias, who was to joke about him jumping into the water and having all the other guys jump in with him, because he can't go on and fight off these three men. But it would be kind of interesting to see him duke it out with these men and just take them down and just like, yeah, go frickin' Elias. But so we turn around and we have Joshua, who is to notice that now the ambulance has disappeared, and so has Elias. And he's like, God dang it, Elias. So Spencer ends up going on to make his way to Joshua, to then realize that the ambulance has been driven off. And so Spencer tries to track it down and be like, hey, that is the one ambulance that I've been looking for. So here's a weird, goofy thing about this. So while Spencer is going on and chasing down this ambulance, he's consistently throwing, like, I think, bubble gum into his mouth. It's so weird how many numerous times he's gone on and done that within the scene. I'm like, how many times is that now? 5, 6? How many times is he just tossing gum and just chewing it in there, to where I think by the end of the film, or by the end of Spencer's story, where he does die here, we just kind of see him still kind of consistently chewing on that gum, and then he dies, sadly enough. But so Spencer ends up going on to then uh, having the ambulance, of course, pull over, and so Spencer then goes on to open the back door, and it's to tell the certain attendee guys to get out of the car, and they end up hauling this guy out of the ambulance, and Spencer is to assume that this is, or we are to, as viewers, also assume that this is Elias, but we end up coming to find out that it's not Elias, it's Hugo, and Hugo ends up stabbing into Spencer without him kind of being aware of what's going on. And so we have Spencer that falls over, he gets stabbed, and then he gets up and he starts firing away at the ambulance, and the ambulance ends up going on and ends up driving off, but then turns around and then rams into Spencer. And here's where they go on and they kill Spencer, and they chuck him into the ambulance right next to Elias, who is now passed out into the ambulance. I'm like, man, this ambulance has just a shitload of room. Like, this just doesn't quite make any sense of how much room this ambulance actually has. And then also kind of looking about how the car is. I don't logically see that much space in this vehicle. I just don't. So the next thing we see is Josh, who is waiting at the Marvel offices, or the office, and he ends up going on and speaking with Malloy here. And so the two of them are talking about how, like, Joshua had gone on and called Spencer a dozen times, and bizarrely, Malloy had gotten a call that Spencer had called off sick and he had the flu. But then when Malloy had went to see Spencer, because Spencer doesn't really have anybody to take care of him, Malloy realized that Spencer wasn't there. So it doesn't really make any sense for him to have called off when logically he's not even home. So we have Joshua that is kind of profiling Malloy as like, man, like, seems like you're the kind of girl that that you really want to go on and have a lot of red flags go off, but like you're still just wanting to get the digits anyways. Like, you're the kind of girl that goes on and like reads my mail and answers my phone calls and finishes my crossword for me. You're that kind of gal. But so uh so as Joshua is stating this, Malloy starts to quickly look around at all the artists' work, and she immediately points out who Joshua's artist or artwork is. And she's like, well, yeah, like, if anything, I could tell that this one is yours because it's a little bit more twisted and this and that. So Joshua ends up going on and giving Malloy the picture of the ambulance. She's like, well, yeah, it's too bad that you can't go on and identify um, the the license plate of the ambulance via this picture. And so Mallory ends up also stating that uh, a lot of the people that eventually Joshua talks to, it seems that they all disappear, even Spencer himself. And there's something about like Joshua that's just like there's some kind of mystery that's going on, and Malloy just can't explain it. So we then have Joshua's like, well, hey, like, since there's now so many people missing, like, how about we go on and report the fact that they're missing? It's like, well, no, we can't really go on and do that now. Like, it's too soon. So really it gets down to them going on and saying like, well, hey, uh like Mallory and Basking, uh Joshua, why he goes on and calls Spencer all the time, and Malloy, or Joshua ends Basking, like Malloy, like why she cares about Spencer so much, and it comes to find out that Spencer's had a few lapses, to the point of him going on and possibly at some point they talk about how Spencer had gone on and almost shot himself, and he's probably done it more than once, but that ends up being talked about a little bit later. So, but if anything, Josh doesn't say like, well, hey, like, the reason why I called Spencer was all about the connection to all the people that had already gone missing, that they were all diabetics, and they had all been carted away via that ambulance. So, uh, Malloy is just like, okay, well, maybe I can come up with a case to be put together because of that. And so she ends up needing to use the phone. And so Josh is like, okay, you dial 9 to get an outside line and call whoever. And it's always kind of funny whenever you would go on and have a business that is to have a phone. Like, nobody can just go on and just grab a phone and just call somebody. Weirdly, I don't know why they had to work this in, that you would have to call 9 to kind of get like an outside line. I don't know why that is to be, why those phones work that way. Let me know in the comments below if you were to know about phones and why they work that goofy manner. I get it also that maybe it could just go on and be like, well, hey, like, they don't want anybody to just kind of pick up a phone and uh and call like an international call or whatever. I get that. But then again, also, logically, I don't also get the fact that like you can't just go on and pick up a phone like a normal phone, and I don't know, it is what it is. Moving on. I'm far too long in the weeds of way past the time of talking about this movie and this and that, because so they end up going on and tracking down the ambulance, and that they realize that it's a 775 Cadillac, and or no, they had to rationalize the model from 65 to 75 Cadillac, and then it's a red and white custom, and they're wrong. They're really trying to figure out how to just kind of track down this car if they can't track down the people. So Josh is also trying to hit on uh, Malloy here, wanting to like just kind of kiss her on the cheek, and Malloy is like, no, 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 like don't go on and don't do that. Like if anything, like you're not thinking of me, you're just thinking of this girl and fantasizing about her still. And like you can go on, you can close your eyes all you want and just imagine that other woman, but that's not going to be me. You're going to be fantasizing about. So like I don't want any of that. So they go on and they start to track down all of these other ambulances, and it leads them down all of these junkyards. So to try to cut to the quick as much as possible, when after uh Joshua was to make it to, or make it through these junkyards, he ends up going on and meeting up with these bums, and they end up going on to kind of follow Joshua here so they can mug him as he goes on to this phone booth to call Malloy. So they go on uh and so Josh relays the fact that he is now at his fourth junkyard, and they picked up some accessory stuff, and they start to realize that more than likely that these are all kind of phony addresses. Uh, and also, like, I think she ends up going on, and there's something to do about her being called beautiful here by Joshua as he answers the phone. And then she goes on and says, like, well, don't call me beautiful. I hate that garbage. So, but also Malloy is to relay to Joshua that Spencer still is gone missing. And so uh, the bigger concern is that possibly Spencer had gone on to end himself. And this hasn't been the first time that something like that has happened with the whole kind of shooting incident. So as Joshua is to go on and be done calling Malloy, he ends up getting out of the phone booth and realizing that there is a number of bums or hobos or whatever. And so Joshua's like, man, I picked the worst day to just get mugged here. So but then he also is to try to make a joke of like, well, hey guys, yeah, you can go on and kind of use the phone, and all I just want to do is just kind of call a cab. And so the lead bum guy is like, well, hey, like, how about you go on and use the subway? And Joshua is like, well, like, I just have so many tokens, but you know what? I just want to call a cab. So one thing leads to another. Joshua tries to fight off against these bums, these hobos, but that just leads him to go on and get beaten up, and an ambulance is to be called and needs to be hauled away. So this ends up being the bad guy ambulance driver people. And so the ambulance drivers go on, they strap Joshua to the bed. And so Joshua is now in a desperation to have these bums come back and try and face off against these ambulance drivers. But this kind of goes nowhere, as it seems the ambulance attendees or whatever, they end up facing off against these bums and they fight them off quite easily, to where Josh ends up making this claim of like, well, hey, I could have gone on and beaten you guys up. And this is like, dude, you failed. You failed already. So Joshua goes on and he's in the ambulance, and so he grabs this little bag, hoping that there might be some tool to usher his freedom. But instead, he ends up finding this coat that ends up saying "Vint" on it, and he doesn't know what that means. He's probably assuming that it's some name, but come to find out instead, will realize that this is to be some wardrobe to be tied to some club, which is to be called Vintage. So in desperation, we have Joshua that is to try and go on and get his cart his bed to force from out of the locking mechanism that it's in, to then have him go on and try to open the door with his feet. And so the door ends up swinging open, and Joshua ends up rolling out of this ambulance, and he ends up just kind of crashing and falling off, as he is to have fallen at the perfect time, which is to be at this hill going out of this ambulance to make him get a lot of momentum to eventually go flying and crashing the way he does. So, but this still leads the ambulance attendees to find Joshua, try and track him down, and go through all these little tunnels and these little underground places, which eventually leads to the ambulance attendees to separate and figure out where Joshua is. And so Joshua takes one of the attendants and ambulance attendees and EMTs or whatever, and he takes one of them out. He kind of just beats one of them down good enough, and then he turns around and he like flings into this gate that I don't believe could just so easily be uh like broken and falls the way it does, but whatever, I guess. Because Joshua can't even go on and break down a door, much less now have to break down this gate. It makes no sense. So Joshua goes flying out of this gate to conveniently have the ambulance be right then and there to figure out a way to try and take out Joshua here. But so conveniently, all while that is going on, Joshua ends up going to this crime scene with this detective McCloskey, and McCloskey is to immediately think that Joshua is to be some witness to whatever is going on within this crime, and so he just won't let that go. So we supposedly have this uh this killer who is some Cuban man, and so uh like they're all just trying to figure out what the heck is to have gone on within this crime scene, and that maybe McCloskey's and what of course Josh has kind of experienced, maybe somehow he can tie them together. Anyways, moving on. So Joshua is to go on and convince this detective that he knows nothing about that dead woman in the park. But then eventually he is just to kind of force to tie the two crimes together, to force this detective to just kind of work with him and help Malloy eventually with what she's gonna go do, which is to make it to this nightclub. So but eventually, the other detectives are trying to figure out how this whole ambulance thing has any tie whatsoever with what had happened at the park. But then also, they had seen the ambulance drivers, and they're like, well, yeah, like we saw them there. Yeah, like maybe they might be somehow connected. But so, uh, Joshua is here and going on and telling Malloy here about the whole Vinny or Vint name that's on that tag. And so uh, now both the two detectives are going on and they're talking, and Malloy is trying to get Joshua all onto herself, and this detective is like, no, 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 like the McCloskey is going on saying, like, well, hey, like he's gonna be my witness to a murder, and you're trying to take him and getting off my beat. So I'm just kind of a little upset with you, this and that, whatever have you. So Malloy is telling this detective, it's like, well, hey, like, there have been 11 missing diabetic people reported in the last 2 weeks. Like, this is the case that I'm working on. And this is to have Joshua be connected to all this. So we then turn and have Joshua who's talking to this other detective. And he's like, you know what? Like, you look just like Jughead. Did anybody ever tell you look just like Jughead? And this officer is saying, like, well, yeah, like I've heard that through my whole entire life. And so, all right, so let me pause here for a second. All right, so eventually this gives Malloy just enough to be able to kind of look into what she's to look into here. So she goes off and she starts to look into paperwork, and McCloskey is going to go on and try and grill Joshua for the whole information about the Cuban guy in the park. Which eventually Joshua's like, oh, okay, all right, well, hey, like And then he ends up kind of throwing the whole Jughead thing at the other guy again, just to make fun of him. So now the Doctor is kind of looking over Elias, and like for the most of the fact here, Joshua realizes that Elias is not a diabetic, but again, the Doctor is using Elias as a bargain chip against Joshua to force Joshua to kind of call off the cops' investigation and say that maybe he had gone on in his comic book mind, just kind of made up this whole story. And so, really, like the Doctor's going on and giving Elias a certain specific bit of medication to make his life very painful and then kind of knock him out. But again, I'm missing a lot of good dialogue here. Uh, but again, there's not enough time. I've already taken so much time up talking about this film. Way more than I probably should have. So Malloy goes on and she eventually goes through the paperwork and she's looking through antique cars, but eventually she realizes that Vint is not actually a person, it's a place. So she goes on to the Vintage nightclub and she goes on to eventually make her way through this club to realize that the ambulance is inside this club, and some of the ambulance attendees are kind of these either people into the club or they're kind of bouncers in this club. So, as well as also come to find out that I think the Doctor is in somewhere in this club. In the club. Anyways, so uh we have Mallory that is going on to notice that she realizes that like she's gotten more out of this case, but she wants to go on and get some kind of backup from McCloskey. And she's also to go on and call and tell him it's like, well, yeah, I think I'm in trouble here. And so like let's call in the cavalry, like come on, let's go. So uh but again, like McCloskey is going on and looking at Joshua. It's like, man, you must have some way with women to have like that woman just kind of believing in your story, huh? So Josh is going on and hearing from McCloskey that hey, like they have supposedly found your ambulance at this nightclub, and so Josh is like, oh, like is Loy on the phone? Can I talk to her? And McCloskey is like, well, yeah, sure. And then he hangs with the phone, and McCloskey's like, McCloskey, what? So Josh ends up going on and is looking at this detective. It's like, wait a minute, like phone to her, like you realize the only reason why that she called you is because she's in trouble. Like she found the ambulance. Like she's gonna die soon. Like if we don't go on, if we don't get to her. So here's where Josh is forcibly now tying uh, the whole Cuban suspect thing with the park to the ambulance case, and the detectives are like, wait a minute, like why didn't you tell us about any of this earlier? And Joshua's like, well, I was so afraid. Like, I didn't know what was going on. And so then that has the detectives force of like, all right, well, we'll go with you to this club then, and we'll see this through. So we have this kind of radio disc jockey guy from Hot 97 that is going on and being this guy who's going on to the Schnauzer and kind of doing this kind of lavish, just kind of thing at this club. So we have Mallory who is starting to go on and just try to just go through this club, and one guy is to try to get with Mallory, but then all of a sudden Hugo ends up coming in. It's like, oh no, like if anything, me and her, we're gonna start just dancing and this and that. So Hugo and Mallory, they start dancing, and so Hugo ends up looking at her. And the more Mallory is to question Hugo, the more he's to just kind of have uh, these kind of just more and more goofy answers. So Hugo goes on and he's starting to dance with Mallory, but the more and more Mallory is starting to realize that this guy is to force her to go into a specific direction. And she's like, man, like you really like are a strong leader. And the guy's like, well, yeah, because I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna try to get you to the VIP. And like I'm gonna get you to the VIP room so I can get some privacy, so I can go on and kill you in private, basically. So this rushes Mallory to get away from Hugo, and so she rushes to the microphone and she goes on and she yells out like I'm a police officer and I need help. Everybody starts laughing. She fires a gun out in the air and everybody just starts scrambling. Joshua and the detectives make their way into the club while everybody is trying to make their way out of it. Joshua even has to go on and grab this stair rail and kind of jump down. So by now, the time that we have Joshua and we have Mallory that get together, then this ambulance goes on to crash uh, crash through this club and is going on and starting to murder and kill a number of officers just kind of by seemingly either crashing into them and also like the doctor is taking his ambulance and crashing almost into both Joshua and Mallory, having them kind of to jump out of the way. So the doctor goes on and takes his ambulance and tries to crash through out of the club. And so uh, the detective is going on and saying that what Mallory and what Josh has done is to almost have started riot what had happened in this club. And Mallory is to state that she had gone on and fired some shots herself. And so the detective is going on and stating to Mallory, it's like, well, hey, man, like doing what you did is even going to go on and probably cost you your badge. Like, good luck with that. So uh, so they're still going on and trying to figure out the uh like where the patients are, because of course there should be a lot of patients. So they're making their way through this club, and because Mallory had realized that Hugo wanted her to go to the VIP room, and so they try to track him down, and so that leads them to go on and find Cheryl, and Cheryl ends up talking to Joshua. Here, where she is to confess how she ends up having a boyfriend named Robbie, and it seems that the two of them are on the rocks. But it seems that now, since her life was in jeopardy, that maybe her and Robbie can work things out. And Joshua is just kind of like, oh my god, like I spent all freaking day like trying to save this girl's life and find her and whatever, all for this to be all for naught, because like this girl has a boyfriend and like she wants me to go on and call this guy, and I just want to tell her fuck him. Like he couldn't have been bothered to take the time to find where this girl is, and she's been missing all this time. Like I guess he doesn't really give a flying f about her. So, so yeah, I had to kind of fast track through all that line of dialogue. So Mallory and now Joshua are now together, and so Mallory's telling Joshua, it's like, well, hey, are you gonna call Robbie? And and so Josh is like, well, yeah, I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna call Robbie, and so he just shouts out like, hey, Robbie Powers, your girlfriend wants you, and he's like, because really he's just ticked off at this point because he spent this whole day trying to save this girl that doesn't even want him, and so Josh was like, you know what, like fuck him, like you know what, like at this point now, like all I need is just think about me, and I just need some freaking sleep. Like he probably hasn't slept in like days now, so Hugo ends up going on to disguise himself as a police officer, and he grabs Mallory, and so what ends up happening is Elias comes in and he ends up knocking out Hugo with this toilet tree thing. When you can go on, you can kind of be in your bed and take a dump, a leak or whatever, and this toilet pan thing. That's the thing that he has. This little pan thing, and he smacks him with it. So and then when Josh realizes, like, oh my god, like, Elias, you're alive, this and that, and he starts hugging and whatever on him. Elias is like, well, hey man, cut the romance. Uh, like, hey, don't forget, like you're gonna give me the exclusive, right? I'm gonna write my Pulitzer surprise or Pulitzer Prize. So Elias and Mallory talking, and all Elias can give two shits about is like, well, hey man, I just gotta get to a typewriter and type this story out, and like I'm not gonna go home and I'm not gonna rest and this and that. Like, no, 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 no. Like I'm gonna get to this story. So and then immediately Linus is to look at Jughead's the Jughead guy is like, well, hey, where have I seen that face before? So both Mallory and both Josh are now in this limo, it seems, and the two of them are just kind of celebrating this victory. And so the two of them are in this limo together and like, man, we're rolling in style. And Joshua tells Mallory, it's like, well, hey, uh, like if anything, since now, like I'm gonna go on and kind of fear for my life. Like, should I go on and just kind of be protected by you, uh, Mallory? And and Mallory's like, well, yeah, like I'll kind of watch you outside your door. And Joshua's like, well, what happens if somebody like attacks me while in my room? And Mallory's like, well, I'll just kind of hold your hand and I'll just be at your bedside. And he's like, what happens if somebody's is attacking me from within my sheets? And so the further and further this escalates, the more we realize that the two of them are going to end up together here. So the two of them get out of this limo and they make their way to Josh's place. And this all of a sudden has Mallory ending up getting attacked by the ambulance. Uh, and so we're almost thinking that Mallory had gotten so crushed or whatever that she's dead, but come to find out that she just got probably injured. So now the ambulance is going on and chasing off Joshua here. And so Joshua is now jumping on this dumpster. And so the ambulance crashes in the dumpster. Joshua ends up falling onto the ambulance. And uh, bizarrely, the doctor ends up crashing his hand through the windshield, and that doesn't make sense to me whatsoever, because like a windshield glass is just so thick that it's very hard for you to go on and get your hand through it. But then again, there are several times where we have seen cases where people have crashed through a windshield, and like look at Pineapple Express with James Franco crashing his foot through the windshield. And Terminator, you could see the robot hand crashing through the windshield. But again, those are just kind of weird circumstances. So now the Doctor is choking Elias here, all while driving around. And so Joshua is able to get away from the ambulance car, and so he's climbing onto this fence, and he realizes that there's this huge behind this fence, this huge gap where the ambulance can go on and fall to its death and then explode, which of course that's what it ends up doing. And so now Joshua realizes that he just needs to trigger this Doctor, just get all well and ticked off to have him try and take him down here. And so we have the Doctor going on and stating, it's like, well, you know what, like I could have saved the lives of thousands of people with my experiments, but like it all comes down to your comic book brain, and like I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you rascaling kids, kind of thing, kind of statement here. So the Doctor goes on, crashes through this fence, and explodes. Death, carnage, whatever. The Doctor is dead. So a real ambulance is to come and collect Josh, as he's already kind of been through this far too many times already. And so this leads him to reunite himself with Mallory right next to him in this ambulance. And so the two of them are trying to go on and look at one another and realize what a wreck they look, and what a mess they are. And so they try to go on and they kiss one another, but their lips never really and truly meet one another. And that's just how this movie just decides to wrap up. And so, really, if the movie starts with this all happened with a strange woman that Joshua had talked to on the street, like it ends that same exact manner with that whole narration about the whole talking to a strange woman on the street. So I'm gonna get that out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody, because I realize how late that this is, and I have nothing more to say, and I'm freaking tired and exhausted. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. I'm sorry for how freaking long this is. I'm always gonna have that problem. No matter what I do, like no matter how short the content is, it's gonna just be forcibly be longer. I'm sorry. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.